Hello, welcome to Freewheeling Fridays with Java Capital. At the moment, it's just me, but I am super excited to say hi to you as always. We're just waiting for Vinod to join us in a moment. We are not going to have Bhargavi joining us today, so it's going to be a bummer. But stay tuned. We have a very exciting uh, very exciting sort of an episode today. We're bringing one of our portfolio companies founders, which we have recently funded. Very exciting company, so we're super excited to talk about that. I just got a message that Vinod is also here, so let me just loop him in. Hey Vinod.
Hey, Karthik.
Yeah, I see that Satya is also here. I am not able to see him though. Satya, if you can just turn your video on. In the meanwhile, I'll let uh, Vinod give a brief introduction about the e.
Karthik, your voice is a little muffled today. Okay, just check that. Anyway, hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another session of Freewheeling Fridays. And today is exciting. And I think last week we put out saying, we invested in this company, and all Bangaloreans, got really excited. If you could fly, a car, from Electronic City to Indiranagar. And one of our co-investors, right, really put that out, and he said, you asked for flying cars, and here it is. And that's what we've got today for you. We have both the founders of ePlane, Pranjal and Satya, joining us any moment. As usual, age of technology. So we should see lots of stuff flying around today. Yeah. And yeah, thanks Vinam. Yeah, Java is going to make an ePlane is going to make all of us fly. So we are excited to have both the founders in a couple of minutes. Do stay on. You will see both Satya and Pranjal joining us shortly as I try and coordinate the back end. Uh,
All right, so I just asked Satya to like sort of refresh the screen, so maybe we'll get with it. And hey, Vinam, thanks, man. Of course, we're in the business of making startups fly, but it's not why not make ourselves fly, right? Um, yeah, it's a super exciting company for us to invest in. Really, really cutting edge technology. So yeah, it's very excited about that. Any better now, Vinod? Can you hear me? Right.
so it's pretty good now. Yeah, pretty cool. Yes.
Great, great, awesome. Thank you. All right. So while Satya is logging in, right? Is there a backstory, Vinod, for this company? How did you? So I think we need to come clean, right? This is a company that you landed, right? Pun intended, right? Yeah. So tell us the backstory behind this company.
No, I think this is one of the companies. It's it's a culmination of a long friendship. Frankly, Karthik, this company in some sense, for me and for us, right? I've known Arjun and Vishesh of Speciali, for a long time, and we were itching to do a transaction and trying to do a transaction, over the last 2.5 years. And it didn't happen, when I was at Kalari K-Start, right? I tried multiple times, multiple companies, actually three companies literally, which Speciali eventually invested, and I was also working to see, if we could invest from Kalari. And that friendship and the trust, right, built over the years, I think is culminated in a transaction or a partnership, rather. I wouldn't call it as a transaction with especially, and it's great to have Satya, because Satya also was involved in Agnikul. That's one of the companies that I looked at very closely at Kalari.
Yeah.
And multiple other companies that Satya is involved. Aerostrobel also I've looked at. So I mean, that way, right? The relationship is really for a lot many years. It's just that we could shake hands after a partnership which had more skin in the game. Finally, in some sense, I'm super excited. That's why when we got this opportunity, to look at it. Thanks, Satya, for having us. On ePlane. Yeah, and
thanks to you for putting confidence in us. What else?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, and I think here we have the man who's going to fly, and Pranjal's also here, who's doing this, because he doesn't like Bangalore traffic purely. And Pranjal, welcome to Freewheeling Fridays with Java Capital.
Hi, Vinod. Thank you for having us here.
Thanks, man. Thanks for joining. This is like an exciting, day. And I think, when it got announced also, it was super excitement. The amount of excitement that just got generated, right? Buzz in the space, right? And I had a lot of people, congratulating us as though we've already done the flying. Like, for seeing the vision far, I'm like, there's like so much more expectations, right? I want to ask both Satya and Pranjal one. I'll ask Pranjal because he's a Bangalore guy. He understands traffic so much more, right? Much more emotional problem for both me and Pranjal, I think, being in Bangalore. So Pranjal, what's the expectation, right? And now you've told you're going to get Bangalore people to feel happy. I mean, burden of expectations is on you guys in some sense, right? Like, what are you feeling, after all this buzz that's happened over the last weekend? So.
I mean, we've now publicly committed to doing this, so we have to work hard and deliver. So obviously there is pressure, but at the same time, it's quite warm to see so many people excited and wanting to see something like this come out of India. So it's always the good feeling to know that people want you to succeed.
Absolutely, man. I think all of us are looking. I think more than, as I said, right. A lot of people outside are just looking, because they see it as like solution for themselves. So maybe Satya, it's a little more easier problem. You have things and more action in Chennai. What made you to do this, Satya? You've done so many companies. You advise so many companies, right? What's driving you to do ePlane?
So I thought this will make a good story for myself, because my pedigree comes from having set up the largest combustion center in the world. And just around the time in 2016, October, when we were finishing building the combustion center and populating it, is when I actually came across a video by Tony Seba, a thought leader from Stanford, who was essentially saying that by 2030, all cars will become electric, self-driven, and aggregated, and all of the power will actually come from solar, which essentially meant that about 2/3 of the combustion that we were doing on automobiles and thermal power were actually knocked off. That left me with only the aerospace propulsion, which was my major anyway. I had been, specializing in that for quite some time, and I had, in some sense, even further down from 2016, I have not really openly told the rest of the world in my combustion community that I am stopping to do combustion, but I think they are beginning to see that. And it will probably become apparent when our plane comes off and so on. But I have actually kind of like in some sense reached like a pinnacle of combustion research in the world at the world level. And so here I was like, the literal feeling that I have is that I had actually built this huge edifice brick by brick, and then I was dusting my hands and turning around to show the world, voila, and then there were the world was actually there to be laughing at me for doing something like this. And so I said, let's actually take on the challenge of the last frontier of combustion, which is aerospace, and see if we can actually start electrifying that instead of always being threatened by an erosion from the electrification that could happen on combustion. So yeah, that's essentially what motivated me.
So, Satya, let me just intervene for a second and ask you a question. But before we do that, we have some people online as well. Guys, if you have any questions for the team, feel free to just type them in, and then we'll present the question to Satya and Pranjal. So, Satya, my question essentially, right, is this is not a new concept, correct? We have been talking about flying taxis or flying cars for quite some time. It's definitely a work of fiction, right? uh, but knowing that a lot of people have tried this before and may have either failed or still in the process of experimenting, right? So what is one or two things that gave you confidence that the plan that you're working on right now, right, is going to be formidable?
Well, when you see something, you should know. I mean, as a scientist or an engineer, whatever I am, a prof, call it, right? If I see something, I should first of all know whether it's fiction or reality, right?
Yeah.
So it could be fiction for a lot of other people, but if I'm actually able to see a line of sight through the tech, right, saying if you do these things, it'll work, right? You string these together, it'll work. Right? The numbers should actually add up in different ways and stuff. That is one thing as far as the tech is concerned. The second thing is, well, let's say people would have talked about flying cars about 20 years back, right? And you always imagine that you have a car where the wings will suddenly unfold from in the middle of the road and then you can take off and so on. All that stuff is like too much science fiction, right? Because cars are, I mean, in fact, there are people who actually swear saying that cars are not really optimized. They need to be a lot more aerodynamic than what they are and so on. And the speeds at which they drive versus they fly and all that stuff is somewhat different, even in like freeways in the Western world, autobahns in Germany and stuff, right? So the thing is, what we are looking at is electric aircraft, and electric aircraft can now get the market disrupted when compared to what could have been possible about 10 years back or 5 years back. Let's say 10 years back, right? 5 years back itself, there are a lot of other electric aircraft companies that have stake their claim on being able to do this. But 10 years back, it was very, very difficult with the kind of lithium-ion batteries they had, and so on. So they were actually talking about combustion based, flying cars, which even if it can fly, it's not going to be worth it. So one of the important things that I learned through the entrepreneurship that I did with all the other companies, unless we are actually talking about something that has a market, there is a product market fit, it's economically viable and so on, don't talk about it. Don't worry about it. There is no point in actually saying that I'm actually doing something technically superior unless it's useful for people, they can afford it. And that's what we are talking about here. We have to be very clear. It's not science fiction. It's not in the realm of impossibility. It's not something that people can't afford and we are doing some gizmo just for the heck of it. Nope. We are actually talking about people getting in and flying at Uber costs.
Awesome.
Got it.
That's great. Thanks, Pranjal. This again for you, right? I saw your Twitter handle. I didn't have it till the day of the funding announcement. I mean, what is driving you also, right? Curious Twitter handle, and you've been involved in flying taxi or flying in some sense, the last 4-5 years, just even in college, right? So what's driving some level of madness and obsession for you? I'm curious because this is a question I never asked you even during the evaluation because I didn't know your Twitter handle then. Right now that I know, I think there's a sense of obsession and madness to this in you. What's that?
So one is that my Twitter handle is actually more recent than my effort to build this, right? It has sort of evolved, and as you might see from my Twitter activity, I haven't really figured Twitter out yet. We're trying to figure out flying taxis. Maybe it'll take me longer to figure out.
Probably one of the evenings I actually was telling Pranjal, why don't you even have a Twitter handle?
Right. But Twitter is nice. It helps me get out there and share what we're doing with.
The interesting thing is about exactly 1 year or 1.5 years back, Pranjal was actually giving it back to me saying, why don't you even have a LinkedIn?
Right. So Twitter is great. Coming to the motivation bit, I tried to do a bunch of entrepreneurship early on in college, right? Startups are not something new to me. This is not the first time I have tried the entrepreneurship space. The idea is that I am attracted more towards hardware and solving two things, right? One is building hardware as an engineer, right? I feel like engineers can do hardware which is something other people cannot do, but other things other people can do and engineers can also do. So we should do something, or at least we should do something which we are specialized in, which is building hardware. That is number one, right? The other is just looking at it from a very fundamental level. There are three basic human needs, right? Food, shelter, and transportation. There are three things that you definitely need. And if you're starting up in any one of these spaces, it's a good space to start in. And building on that argument, the kind of thing we're trying to do with mobility, which is try to reduce travel time by 10 times. You're going to free up so much human time, which can be either used for personal development or for more economic growth, right? I mean, that 1 hour you save every day can be used for building the next big scientific thing. So overall, for a society, we're going to increase productivity, right? Overall, there is wealth creation that is going to happen. And it is at a very high magnitude. It is not at a 10%, 20% level. It's at a 10x level, right? So just looking at what can happen if we are successful in building this flying taxi is just very exciting. And that's why we're crazily passionate about it. That yes, it's a hard problem to solve. Yes, it will take a lot of time and capital. But if we solve it, the world will be a different place.
No, absolutely, Pranjal. So I keep Karthik, okay, yeah. I think I keep telling, right, if we solve this problem, I won't live in Bangalore. I might live in the outskirts, and that's my motivation. I would want to stay in a nice somewhere in a farm. Somewhere like slightly remote. And I keep telling, not just time, I can live where I want. Today somewhat it's happened because of COVID, right? And imagine, this dimension of change. I'm like super excited exactly for that reason, actually. In a way.
So just to add to that, right? Very early on when we had not figured out our pitch, this is like almost, I think, 1.5, 2 years back. Our pitch used to start with a very nice picture of a home in a jungle. And we used to say, hey, is this a nice house? And people say, obviously it's a nice house. We'd say, is this a house you want to wake up in every morning? And it is possible if we can build this flying taxi. Obviously, we've moved away from that pitch. But the idea is that we can really see how this will allow people to grow, how allow people, cities to grow, and for people to move into areas which are not so crowded and live in areas where it was not possible to before because of the sheer time it would take to get to the city, right? And what you are saying is something that we are thinking will happen with this, and this taxi will be an enabler.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Well, I think I want to just add to a couple of things that Pranjal said. One is it's a hard problem to solve, all right, but I think it's not as hard as what Agnikul is doing, which is like making a rocket. That is number one. Secondly, I think along with Agnikul, I would also want to say that the other thing about 2020, the electric vehicle, the batteries, and all of that stuff is also about doing things in India. And in a global sense, actually, the kind of capital that we are talking about is much smaller when compared to what other people are taking. So, I mean, we have to have that global sense. Otherwise, we'll always be thinking it's actually very capital intensive and all those things. That's a poverty of the mind rather than, actual literal poverty of our wallets.
So Satya, actually, my next question to you, actually, I parked it for, actually, that's what you brought up, right? I mean, this poverty of mind, right? And I mean, why is that, we have that mindset, in some sense, right? It's not necessarily capital, I feel, right? Like, why is that? And do you think, this question again keeps coming to me also, right? I mean, is India ready for this kind of innovation? What are you guys doing in India, funding a flying taxi company or a rocket company, right? This is a question that kind of gets thrown at both investors and founders, I think, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure, you've thought about it because you mentioned about this, right? Like, what's your take on that, right? Are we ready, to take on the world in some sense, especially when it comes to these innovations that's happening, like you mentioned Agnikul, great, again, great story out of India.
Yeah.
We're talking about E-plane. You are, in some sense, setting the path. What's your take, what's this reason for poverty of mind?
Yeah. So, another way of asking this question is why am I actually, having a co-founder who is about the same age as my daughter, right? So there is a very good reason why it's possible that millennials will actually have a changed mindset when compared to. In fact, Pranjal still is pretty bad on that. He still thinks that America is great. Okay, I mean everybody is free to think like that, but the problem essentially is. There is absolutely, I mean, there is. It's not like 100%, yes or no about this. Americans assume that America is great. Indians also assume America is great.
Okay, you know why Karthik laughed? Karthik also thinks the same thing. It's not just millennials.
So I said it right. So when I look at something, I want to actually see whether it is science fiction or science. That means like you put all these things stacked together and then check whether it's going to work or not. If that is going to add up, right, including all the economics, whether we are able to fundraise, everything put together, right, we are able to convince people and do this. And if it is doable, done over here, there is no reason to believe that we can't do this. I mean, the laws of physics are the same. The value of G is 9.81 meter per second squared everywhere, right, and so on, right? So why bother? Why get obsessed about the fact that we can't do anything in India? That's actually, in fact, I put it the other way around. You are the one who is the problem.
Satya and Pranjal, we have a question from one of our audience, right? I think it's a very relevant sort of a question. I'm going to put it on the screen right now. Right. So, what kind of government issues are you expected to face? Uber, for instance, had to work a lot with local governments in every new city. What's your take on this? Would one of you like to handle that?
I can do a bit, but I think Pranjal will probably have a lot more. Yeah. So
Sure.
The reason why I actually jumped in to take that question is because pretty much whatever I do has got something to do with the government. So first of all, that doesn't scare me anymore. That's the thing, right? So I mean, look at Agnikul. We had like 2 rounds of investment by investors, and we could actually convince them before we could answer the question whether we are actually legal to launch in India or not. First of all, right? And look at the kind of confidence they had in the whole thing, and I really am thankful to them. So with Agnikul, we were not even legal to launch until recently. Okay, and then it takes like such a long time to raise funds and get to the point. Srinath was like, yeah, I think by the time we get to the launch pad, yes, I think they will agree. Right. So it is very similar here, but actually much more easier. Making a plane, getting it certified, and taking off from this thing, what do you call, helipads and landing in helipads is a done deal. There is nothing new about this, right? What is going to be interesting is like if you are crowding the skies, if you are going to get to a point where the network is going to become dense, we are having these planes crisscross all the time, and they are all autonomously flying, particularly, and they are talking to automatic ATCs without any human intervention. Those are the frontiers that we think when we cross, it will be very interesting and significant. And for that, we actually have a lot of other guys going ahead of us. So we are not the pioneers in it, which I'm very grateful about. So they will face all of that stuff, and we will come right behind. I mean, with hopefully a superior product than them. That's the strategy, right? Pranjal, I think you probably would want to say something.
Yeah. Definitely, there are going to be government issues if you're talking about a new area, right? So anything which is not defined, if you look at Bitcoin, if you look at when artificial intelligence, biotechnology, the idea here is, and not just for us, right? Any such startup, can you sort of work with the government, keep them informed from day one, talk to them as much as possible, and sort of lead the way for enabling rather than just maybe lament about the challenges that there are, right? Because yes, there is change which is required, but also there is significant effort at the government end to sort of appreciate these sort of new technologies which can make life better for everyone.
I mean, I think overall thing is like, see, if you are actually trying to make any change that is of societal impact, politicians will jump on it, governments will come in and come up with regulations and stuff, because we are actually impacting people. So that cannot be a barrier to our mindset. We need to actually try to breach those barriers, like what Uber did in all the new cities and stuff that they were talking about. Yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty interesting. So what's that one thing you would, Karthik? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. No, this is both the Pranjal and Satya, right? What's that one thing you want to see as a change in the government? Imagine if we have to make this really feasible. where it goes live. Yes, the flying of the plane can happen, but when will it reach really people? What's the couple of changes in policy or the government's thinking that you would want to see, for this to kind of get to really flying for the common man in some sense?
Well, right now, I'm not seeing the government actually opposing anything, first of all. There are set rules. You have to go through the certification processes. There are safety standards that we have to meet. There is airworthiness certification that we have to go through. So they're all like set standards. All we have to do is to just go through those, right? And then we start flying. When we start flying, we actually follow the existing rules for how helicopters would fly, which means that we notify the ATC, we get a NOTAM, whatever it is, all the protocols are we done. Now the question is, if you want to scale, we want to try to make this autonomous, and we want to try to have an autonomous ATC. All right. There is a gap. There's going to be a gap between when we go to market and when that can be enabled, and during which time we will actually do things the current way of doing things, right? Currently, they are not being done simply because of economic reasons. It's not just simply viable. If I have to actually ask you for going, I mean, where did you say Pranjal Vinod was wanting to go from to Koramangala, from Whitefield to Koramangala, right? If I'm going to ask you for 5,000 rupees to take you in a helicopter from Whitefield to Koramangala, you're not going to come. Whereas if I'm actually asking you to do this for 1,500 rupees and I say that I'll do it in 10 minutes, probably you will come. That is what is stopping. Government is not stopping, right? Where will government stop us is where you will actually have autonomous, when things have to be crowded, we have to scale and stuff. But as I said, other companies will be pushing that envelope, and we will actually follow right behind that. This is one thing. The other thing that we always have a lurking fear in our minds about the Indian government is that will the Babus drag on? Will there be delays? Will there be any some shady deals that they want? I have no idea about it. Okay, so far.
That's Pranjal's department looks like.
Definitely over the last few years, things have improved, right? And there is the initiative from the government to make sure that there is ease of doing business, and startups particularly can flourish in this country and not die out because of these inefficiencies, right? So we're hopeful. It's important to stay positive when you're building flying taxis, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Pranjal, there is a shout out from Peak Bengaluru. Okay, I'm just gonna put it up on the screen for you to see and respond.
Yeah.
Please help in commuting to. Just give us a couple of years, guys. Working hard. Please don't rush us on this. Planes are, I would say, complex machines and require utmost precision to make. So just don't rush us on it. But definitely in a couple of years. Also, just adding to what Prof said, right, on the question of what is the most critical thing that the government would have to do. I think to just take off things that are already in place, as Prof said. But for this to become something which is as widespread as a car, because that is really what you're trying to replace, right? Replace cars and become 10 times faster in moving around, is that governments will have to understand that there has to be some sort of an access near the home or the endpoint, right? It cannot be just these helipads or vertiports, as they are calling them now, which are roughly equivalents of bus stops, right? So at some point, we have to start figuring out how to make door-to-door commute possible, right? Can we land in the curb? Can we land on the terrace?
I think, Pranjal, that is there, right? There are 150 helipads on rooftops of Bangalore. I don't know if a lot of people are actually watching from Bangalore. I have a good news for you. There is a helipad very likely on your terrace.
There is one on mine, I know, in my family home. So.
Right. So you have apartment complexes which can actually afford helipads. What we will work with the government is to actually get them activated.
Yeah, I'm just hoping, a lot of people who are listening, right, the government's also listening somewhere in this conversation, and Peak Bangalore is one of the favorite things, it talks about what really happens in the startup world. It reaches a larger, wider audience, and, I think they're a good starting point. That's and the pressure is on Pranjal to deliver from being a Bangalore boy. Looks like, that's clearly there.
It's good to have that pressure. Keeps us, makes us work harder.
Yeah, I'll ask Peak Bangalore to tweet once a month or once a week, Pranjal. I'll make sure that. Okay.
But do tag me and tag our ePlane company handle, please. Very important for our publicity.
Wow, Pranjal is doing his job.
Yeah, awesome. Uh, uh, Karthik, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, so just a related question, guys. It's Sham, one of our ardent supporters at Java Capital, right?
Yeah, I know, that's right. Yeah.
And yeah, so he's asking about the drone policy. Is it progressive enough? Does the drone policy really apply to you guys? Do you guys get categorized as a drone company, or are you a plane, or is it something entirely new?
Right. So well, I think you asked an additional question to what Sham has asked. So let's just start with Sham's question quickly, and of course, Pranjal is free to add whatever I'm saying. So the drone. Well, my reading of the situation is, I think the DGCA and the Ministry of Civil Aviation are actually taking stock of what's happening in the drone space, and they are trying to enable it. They are doing lots of different steps. The policy itself, I think, is going in the direction of trying to enable what's called as beyond visual line of sight, or BVLOS operations, which ultimately should enable door deliveries of your Swiggy pizzas or whatever it is in urban areas. But we are still far from there anywhere in the world. As a matter of fact, I think even Amazon had to actually withdraw their drone program recently or something of that sort in the US. So what is now possible in other parts of the world is probably drone operations in remote areas, what they call as green zones, whereas there are red zones which are sensitive, and yellow zones which are crowded. It's still not allowed in other parts of the world as well. And India is sort of like getting there inch by inch in a systematic manner, and it's taking a little bit longer than I would have wanted or expected. Maybe the COVID pandemic did something to it. We can always use that as an excuse for delays, right? So that is one thing. The second thing is, there is always like a lot of fanfare. Like, for example, they said they would want to have the digital sky platform for some no permission, no takeoff. It's taken like a long time for them to actually implement the website and make it operational and so on. So they have the framework all right, but I think implementation is still a bit tardy at the moment. That's what I can see. That's as far as the drone is concerned. Now, what we are trying to do as far as the air taxi is concerned is it's a passenger aircraft. So we want to actually get ourselves to have laws applied for what we see for helicopters and small planes. That's the space in which we would like to operate as far as the air taxi is concerned when compared to drones. But I think we will probably want to have the helicopter laws also eased for the class of aircraft that we are making, with the kind of redundancies that we will build in with electric and so on. So we will have to see if they will enable that sooner or later. But we are not really necessarily looking at drone laws for this purpose. We are looking at drone laws for cargo, right? Autonomous cargo. And there our tech is actually a little bit ahead of what they are prepared for right now, which is the conventional multicopters. That's what they are working on right now. So it will take at least a couple of years for them to warm up to something more like what we have in our hand. Those are the couple of answers I can think of.
Got it.
I think
Got it.
Satya has said enough about this. I don't particularly have anything to add.
So Pranjal, let's get some fun going, right? In some sense, right? Like let's. So what should I expect, right? Like next from ePlanes. Now we've told the world, we coming, we're going to take you on this ride. What should people expect? In a sense, how much time or what should they expect?
So looking at all the other big companies out there, and we are trying to become one. So also okay to look at them is that they sort of tend not to talk about these things to build suspense, right? So maybe I should just do that. But jokes apart, we're just working very hard to sort of build this flying taxi that we're talking about. And as and when internally we have things that we can share with the public, we would give out snippets to keep people interested, to keep the word going, and to keep showing what is about to come. But more importantly for us, and since we're talking about everybody wanting us to succeed, we really want good talent, if they are listening to us right now, to come and tell us that, hey, we want to join your team and want to work with you, because we're going to need a lot of smart people to come rally behind us, join our team to be able to build an exceptional product that can truly compete at the global level, right? So that's what's really happening. We're trying to expand our team, and we're building 24/7.
Yeah, I think one of the specific points along those lines is that Pranjal always is worried that we are actually working out of Chennai and we may get a lot of talent in Bangalore otherwise and stuff, right? So to all those talented Bangaloreans, please come to Chennai and then we can go back to Bangalore fast.
Satya, this is going to the world, right? It's just that me and Peak Bangalore and Karthik are in Bangalore. That's it.
True. I mean, but Bangalore is actually the most traffic, congested city in the world. So when I'm talking about Bangalore, I'm talking to the world.
Yeah, absolutely right. And deployment first in Bangalore, making the promise, Pranjal.
Not sure about that. I'm not sure how many of them are going to give the money that we want.
I mean, we're open to this policy, and sort of users have to drive that adoption.
Yeah.
Right?
When we get down to the point of exactly Uber cost, we will be in Bangalore.
I think Bangalore.
On that note, actually, I wanted to ask is a much more serious question, Pranjal, if you will, right? You have to bring the cost down to Uber cost, one, and two, for you guys, the problem is actually twofold, right? It's one thing is for you to develop the technology, and two, you have to build this entire operations, right? For these things to become a reality, right? And I know it's a couple of years out, but have you guys already started thinking about doing that, or what's happening in the planning stages? Can you give us a peek?
So two parts to that, right? One is on the how do we get to Uber cost, and two, once you get there, how do you So on the Uber cost, what's interesting is that the kind of vehicle we're designing is keeping that in mind, that at a certain, doing all those numbers and simulations, at a certain time and operation scale, can we get to that cost, right? And what's very interesting is that we've been able to, at least empirically or theoretically, get to that number. And so we are of the belief that it can happen. And once you start just looking below the surface, it gets quite simple as to why this might happen, right? Electric, you don't pay for fuel. It's autonomous. It's going to be autonomous over time, so there is no pilot cost. And also the cost to make electric and so on and so forth is much cheaper, right? So overall,
maintenance as well.
Maintenance, right? So overall, you're going to have a much cheaper OPEX than what current helicopters have. And when you start calculating that OPEX, you realize that it is comparable to the cost of what the Uber of the world are today. So you can maybe compete on price, maybe slightly more, slightly less, right? So that is something that we've already done and we understand. Then coming to the next part is running our own fleet and the ops around it. Definitely a complex task, and cannot be simple. Cannot be said it's simple at all, right? That's a crime. But having said that, we also have certain reasons to believe that this is possible now more than ever, right? And that is very simply because autonomy allows for ease of operations. To design a plane and manufacture is a very different game from actually running a fleet, right? And the kind of expertise required is very different, and that's why you don't see any automotive companies actually running a taxi service. But once the taxis become autonomous, the complexity of running such a service decreases by 10x roughly, right? And that is when a manufacturer can aspire to run their own taxis, and that is what we're planning to do.
Got it. I have an interesting question here, Pranjal. I mean, Professor, feel free to jump in as well. I mean, does take on boom? Does E-Plane has plans to go supersonic as well?
I mean, none yet. We're super focused on building this taxi which can take you from A to B within cities, right? So
Vinam, we should tell Vinam is a good friend of ours also. If Vinam $100 million, we can think about boom.
if that is the case, yes, then we can definitely look at something like that.
Awesome.
Another interesting comment, Pranjal. It's more of a comment than a question, right? So, just as of yesterday, Hyundai promised flying taxis out in 80 years. Does E-Plane have plans to do the same?
So, 80 years. 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 So, 80
right? I think the market has reached this inflection point, if you will, right? This is going to be a reality, whether we like it or not. You know, and I think it's great that companies like yourselves in India, right, are saying that, hey, look, we believe in this reality and we will help shape that reality.
Yes, absolutely. When I first met Professor, right, he was at almost the peak of combustion, not just in India, across the world, right? And the first thing I would ask him is, "Hey, you're doing well. Why do you want to get into this?" And he said, "Pranjal, the world is changing. Instead of either denying it or just looking at it from the sideline, why can't I be the change, right?" So, as you just said, this is going to happen. It's a matter of whether we can work hard enough to be the ones that can make it happen, and that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. I think that's like a great note, Pranjal. To almost, I think we're there. Satya, if you have to add anything, feel free to. Thanks for joining us on freewheeling. I look forward to a day, and Pranjal is familiar with that. Pub hopping is common in Bangalore. I can use an e-plane and pub hop. That's like
I think you're better off with an autonomous one then.
You don't want anybody drinking flying.
yeah.
But guys, I think there's another interesting question. And before we let these folks go, how did you guys meet? There is an interesting story, I'm sure there.
Oh, this is actually for me. This is a very interesting story. I don't know if it is for Satya. So I went to the same college where Professor was a. Okay, I should call him Satya when I'm calling him Professor after. So where Satya was a professor, and one of his students, a friend of mine, also a senior of mine, and I was just walking on the street, right, in college. And I said, "Hi, what are you up to?" And she started telling me, "You sort of catch up with friends on campus, right? Hey, what's happening this semester?" And so I just told her, "Hey, this business competition happened." And she's like, "Yeah, I heard about it." So we had just won a nice business competition. We had won against IIM students. So we had some amount of word going around about us on campus, right? And she knew about it. She said, "Very nice, Pranjal." And then I asked her, "What is she doing?" She said, "Hey, I'm working with this professor who wants to build electric planes." And I just had this grin on my face. And she's like, "Why? What's humorous?" I said, "Hey, I worked out a case for a helicopter taxi service once. Makes sense, but never really did anything about it." He said, "Hey, cool," and that was the end of it. She went and told Satya. Satya got interested, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come over and we'll chat?" And one evening, I find myself sitting in his balcony, and he goes on for an hour on how he's the best professor in combustion, and I bought all of it. And ever since we've been working together, right? So this is the story on how we met and started working together.
Let's listen.
Our ecosystem has seen everything, right? We've seen husband wife startups. We've seen brother startups. I think we've come a full circle. It's matured, guys. It's a mature ecosystem now. We have a professor,
And a student.
student startup as well.
Yep.
So I remember when we used to go around pitching, right? I would introduce myself first, and I would say, I introduce myself first because I am the age of Satya's career, right? So it would look bad if I introduce myself second. So yeah, that is indeed true.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being there. We wish all the best. We are looking to be part of this ride, and thanks for having us. Thanks, Satya. Thanks, Pranjal, for the time. Wonderful having you. Look forward to.
Yeah, I enjoyed the evening. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Vinod,
and thanks for believing in us.
Yeah. Important for folks like you to believe in early founders like us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah. Thank you. You too.
Oh, man, that was like one of the sessions where the energy was just flowing through, Karthik. I mean,
Correct. Yeah. It's very natural and freewheeling.
Yeah, you can just feel like really the adrenaline rushing through, and when you're talking to some founders, right? And that's the sense, phenomenal day, frankly, and I'm like super excited, right, to see this. Thing. I think this is the reason, you want to really do VC. If you ask me, it's not I mean, yesterday there was a question on Twitter. Naval was saying, what do you want to do? It feels like play, but you're working. It looks like work for others. It's play for you. I mean, I think this is the kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Some, right. Great, and I'm like
Vinam,
super.
thanks for the love, as always. I'm glad you enjoyed this.
Yeah.
This is definitely fantasy becoming reality, right? We're talking about science fiction stuff. Can't wait for this, man. I mean, this is very exciting. I think what is uber exciting is it's not just the founders, right? There are investors who are believing this story, right? Deep tech story coming out of India.
Yeah.
And I think these startups are going to be trailblazers for more of such startups to come in the near future, right? It says, look, this is possible coming out of India, right? It's not just the copycat models anymore, where you take a model from China or US and try to replicate it here, but these are like real technology, real science, and real differentiation in the models and the products.
I think that's absolutely bang on, right? That's also my question to Satya was, to just bring out that aspect, right? A lot of young people listening to the session, right? I mean, I think they should just think, yes, it's possible to break barriers, and really, think of fundamental science innovation. And there's like a tremendous supportive ecosystem that's emerging, Karthik. IISc, be it IITM. I think the government, right? I just see their hand, in a lot of places where where it's required. Finally, in some sense, if you ask me, right? When it comes to supporting startups, a lot of grants happening in biotech space. I was yesterday attending a genomics webinar. Again, BIRAC supporting it, DST supporting it. For the first time, I'm starting to feel like, look, the government's like is at the right place, especially when it comes to deep technology and innovations. I think it's also stemming from the fact that we no longer can depend on the world for all of these innovations, right? We have to build our own, which is what we realized, in the standoff with our neighbor. We've realized, and I think that kind of also provides the government, a push. In some sense, and I'm starting to see that happening. The other startup that we spoke to prior to just this freewheeling session, Karthik, there is so much of involvement of the government in some sense. That's again a fundamental innovation that's possible, right? That we should see, what happens to that. I'm like super excited. We would see Lux Capital, DCVCs happening out of India, and we are poised, and we no longer like our e-commerce driven country where investors globally come and put this or that strategy work. Maybe it works, but we are more than this of that strategy. We can build ground up from here, this itself, in a way.
Yeah, these are the signs of maturity, if you will. So moving on, Vinod, do we have any new announcements to make in the near future? We'll see. I think we'll probably have one more announcement to make. But hey, I'm just thinking, should we take a couple of weeks off towards the end of this month, man? I think we deserve it, no?
Let's give the freewheeling a break. Huh?
A break for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So let's just make people miss it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wait, there's just a comment from Sham actually. It's you should start looking to Israel too. A lot of interesting stuff happening there. Yeah, I think Israel has been a pioneer. No question about it.
So strangely, I had looked at Aluminium Air Company in Bangalore. Again out of IISc, and there's only a global competition coming out of Israel. And this company was funded eventually by one of the top VCs in the country. That's like also an interesting sign, right? So Israel obviously is like way ahead, especially in this kind of technologies when it comes to. Hopefully,
correct.
Yeah, absolutely, Sham. Agree to that. Yeah, Karthik, I think maybe today, right, we should not talk about what caught the eye. I think we should leave viewers guessing and figure out what caught them.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, nothing really caught my eye, other than a couple of funding announcements, right? That you can anyway get on on the likes of Live Mint or VC Circle or some things like that. Okay, so we'll wrap up. Thank you so much, guys, for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Vinam's
And
announcement for Freewheeling Friday, folks. Come invest with us. That's it, Vinam.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yes. So I think we will probably do one more session next week, and then we'll take a break. I know a lot of us will want to travel. Finally, travel is possible. Without with some safety precautions, obviously. And great, man. I mean, it's been a busy week for us. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend, guys. See you.
All right. Take care, Shivam. Thanks for your message.
Thank you. Bye-bye.